What's up, guys? Danny Carlson here with the Actualize Freedom Podcast, and today we have on Stephen Loy from Private Label Authority. He's been doing more than $2 million a year on Amazon, and he's also a client of Kenji ROI's for the past year or so, and I've had the pleasure of chatting with him quite a bit. He's one of the most knowledgeable people that I've met in the Amazon space, which is really saying something, and it's my pleasure to introduce to you the one and only Stephen Loy. Welcome, man.
Hey, no, thanks for the intro. I don't really know how to respond to that kind of intro. Thanks for the kind words. Yeah, definitely been going at this Amazon business for quite a few years now. So I think it's just all the masterminds, trying to get into this stuff myself, but also all the agencies that I work with. So just been accumulating a lot of the kind of knowledge and stuff like that over the last, I think, 5.5, 6 years in doing Amazon private labeling. So happy definitely to share back some of this knowledge with the community.
Yeah, and for those watching on video here, what percentage of your success would you attribute to that awesome gaming chair that you're sitting in right now?
I would say I spend a good 3 to 4 hours on this chair per day, right? So it definitely keeps me upright, posture good, all that kind of stuff. So I highly recommend it. It's a DX racer chair, but there's quite a few of these brands, and I highly recommend it if you're in your study and you're hammering away at your business. Yeah, all good. Bit of a plug for the DX Racer.
Oh, I love it, man. You can check out Stephen Loy's affiliate link. No, just kidding. So, Stephen, something I know you're super knowledgeable about, and the main reason why I'm bringing you on this podcast here to talk about is revenue versus profit. Like many of the gurus out there, they show their revenue numbers and they're like, yeah, I made $1 million, blah, blah, blah. And they don't talk about how much profit they actually made. And in so many cases, a lot of these people are even losing money with $1 million in revenue. So maybe let's just dive into that. What is your opinion on the current state of revenue versus profit and what people should really watch out for?
Yeah, it's like to me, it's actually a huge problem, right? I know we've sort of chatted about this in the past and even just a little bit before, where like there's just so much that people focus in terms of the sales when it comes to Amazon private labeling. And I think it is because of a lot of the courses, the YouTube videos and all that kind of stuff, where even in Facebook groups where people are just posting up sales and revenue numbers. And I think that's all really good for motivation and inspiration and all that kind of stuff. But at the end, we're in this business to make money. Yes, there's all, other altruism, type, motivations about this, right? But at the end of the day, it's still a business, and it's really what you bank, right, as profit. And that's usually something that's not talked about a lot. There are some really, great teachers and course creators out there that also show some of their profit numbers, right? But even those profit numbers, whether they're fully baked in with all the kind of, aspects and the costs that would, influence that sort of end profitability and that net profitability, I think that's also debatable. So to me, because of all that kind of stuff, there's just this whole false sense of what's possible with private labeling versus other business models. Also, whether people are focusing in on profitability and all that kind of stuff when they're doing their product research. And that's definitely one aspect when I talk to my clients that I can sort of consult with, or my students that I coach. It's generally one of the weaker aspects of this, because a lot of people start Amazon private labeling without having like really big sort of, sort of experience with managing a business or running a business, right? So they come from different walks of life, whether it's the corporate world, whether it's just, other types of jobs and stuff like that. And they've never really managed a business. So then they don't really focus in on the profitability aspects. And I think that's the other part of the issue. But yeah, I do see it as a bit of a problem, because you can actually generate a lot of sales. And in my first couple of years of selling, like I sort of really focused on the revenue and really tried to push the growth. But then in my second year, I did do a lot of cost cutting, where I did a lot of things to reduce the actual cost base to then get the profitability up. But typically speaking, like I would say it's still a more profitable business model than things like, drop shipping and wholesaling and retail arbitrage, online arbitrage, that sort of stuff, where I think private labeling still, has maybe, 10 to 15%, better sort of net profit margins at the end of it. And then one thing which a lot of people don't also talk about is the business equity that you're also building in a Amazon private labeling business, right? And we can have a bit of a talk about that later as well. But, one of my students recently sold just a one product account, right? So he wasn't in love with this product, and it was doing okay, but we spent like 3-4 months really working on the traffic, the conversions, but also, reducing some of the costs and all that kind of stuff. And then over a 3 to 4 month period, I mean, this just one product business, so it's a UK account, like £120,000 it sold for, right? So, and usually the multiplier that you get, so here in Australia, there's a company called Flipper, and they flip businesses and domains and, generally online businesses. And they've got a really big presence here in Australia in flipping Amazon private label businesses. And so they hold a lot of events, which I go and I do some presentations at these events and stuff like that. And looking at the numbers that you get to see, it's generally in that 32x of the monthly profit, right? So if you had, let's say, argument's sake, a $30,000 revenue per month Amazon private label business, and let's say you did 30% margin, so let's say it was close to 10% net profit at the end, then you could be selling this business at like 300k, right? So that's the equity that you're sort of building inside a private label business as well. But yeah, we can dive into all the details around sort of business equity, but I think the that whole issue of profit versus revenue, yeah, big problem in our industry.
Yeah, so there's a few things that I want to touch on what you just said there. A lot of people just are posting in the Facebook groups, just posting their revenue and saying nothing about the profit, right? Yeah. Do you think that maybe has something to do with human psychology, people protecting their egos? Just like on social media, people don't post when things are going bad. They post the highlights and posting themselves in the best lights possible, right? Because people don't want to show the negative stuff.
Yeah, and I think there's two parts of it. There are some, guys that I mastermind with, and I know that their profit margins are actually sort of, okay. But then again, like profit margin is also something that I think is a little bit more personal to a business too, right? So, we've got the revenue side of things, and people are sort of happy to sort of, just talk generally about revenue, but they don't want to sort of also expose their profit numbers, because sometimes it's just no one else's business but your own business, right? So that's a little bit of it, but I do think a lot of times they are posting revenue numbers, and sometimes it doesn't really stack up, because when you look at some of the guys I mastermind with, and even my own businesses, so I've got 2 brands, like one in fitness and one in homewares. And my homewares brand is a little bit, so it's only been a year old, whereas my fitness brand has been like 5.5 years old. So you can definitely squeeze more profit margin out of a business that's sort of been around for longer, because to establish, a business and the products and all that kind of stuff, you're sort of churning through, spending a lot more, right? Especially on the marketing side of things. So when I look at my businesses, it's 26% for net profit, and I'll talk about what my definition of net profit is, right? And then the other one's 22%. Right. And so you take a look at that and you say, okay, so, if you're doing, significant enough numbers on that kind of percentage, it's still a really, really good business. Right. But when we take a look at net profit, and we take a look at those percentages, like typically we've got, the cost of goods, right? So what you're paying your supplier. Then you've got, a certain percentage, which is going to be around the logistics. So getting it, if you're sourcing it from Asia, getting from Asia to the States, ground shipping to FBA and all that kind of stuff. Then you still got all the FBA fees, right? So depending on the size of the product, the type of product, you've got the referral fees, the 15-20% referral fees that Amazon charges, depending on which category. Then you've got all the FBA fees if you're doing FBA. And I think most sellers in private labeling are doing FBA. And that could sort of, the Amazon fees can sort of range from, like 28 to 35% of your selling price, right? Like when you take everything into consideration, depending on what sort of, sort of selling price product you've actually got. And obviously the higher the selling price, the lesser that percentage as a percentage or proportion. But then there's still other costs, right? So I generally would dedicate about 20% to marketing, and generally that's like 10% to, Amazon PPC, sponsored products and AMS. And then you've got, external traffic that you might want to drive. So anything from, Facebook, Instagram influencers, all that kind of stuff. But then there's other things. There's still like returns, defects, depending which category. That can be 1%, that can be 4%, it could be 8%, like in electronics sometimes. And then there's other sort of sundry costs, like sometimes there's long-term storage fees if you haven't sort of done your inventory right. And I know Amazon is sort of relaxing some of that sort of stuff for the coming year. But you sort of bake in all that kind of stuff. And typically what you really want to target is between 20 to 30%, in my opinion, right? And so the way that I generally go about this is when you do your product research, that's where it all starts. And a lot of new sellers don't really, they do their product research. They might look at some numbers in Jungle Scout, Market Intelligence, all those sort of tools, or Healing 10. And then they'll, do some numbers, and they don't even look through all the metrics. They might look through like 5-10 metrics where, instead of looking through 25 or 30 metrics, but then they'll do that. And then they'll just, proceed with the product, or they might even just go with a Jungle Scout opportunity score and just sort of dive into a product.
Yeah, that blows my mind. Some people
yeah, it really
like,
does.
It's got the best opportunity score on Jungle Scout, so I'm gonna do it. That's it. That's all I need to know.
It's like it's 8 or 9. It's great. You can generate $100,000 in revenue and they just dive straight in. In going through that process, I like to go through like almost like 4 stages. So we do all the numbers, right? And then beyond the numbers, we still need to create the offering. So in my opinion, even if the numbers look great, but you can't differentiate, you can't bring a really great offering into the market with more value and all that kind of stuff, it doesn't matter what the market and the numbers say, you still can't make any money, because if you can't actually bring a great product to market, you still can't make the money, right? Then the next stage is all around, the branding and how it fits within your brand, positioning, all that kind of stuff. But then the fourth part is what we're talking about right now, which is the profitability, right? And also the cash flow. And I'll just touch on cash flow in a few moments.
So just real quick there, you're basically saying what you just said there is that the days where you could just come in and launch the exact same product as everyone else are basically gone. You have to bring some real value with a product that differentiates, and it has maybe better branding, better features, or whatever it is, right?
And that's it. Like, that's a generalization, but in general, yes, because like there are still probably some underserved markets where you can just throw some stuff up there, or some micro markets where you can do that. But if you're talking about more of the competitive markets, and certainly the majority of the type product types and categories and stuff like that, that definitely be the case. Like the days 5 years ago where you could just throw up a logo and just do some packaging and get the product out there, I think they're over for just about 80-90% of the markets and the products that are on Amazon. And I think it's a good thing, right? Because building a proper brand and a business, it's like what we said before, like you're also building business equity into that business. Whereas if you just have a whole bunch of generic stuff, that business equity isn't really there, or it's definitely lower. So at the start of the product research process, because you don't understand all those cost elements that we talked about, right? So you're not going to know exactly the logistics costs. You don't know exactly what your marketing, costs are going to be, and your returns and defects and all that. So all that kind of stuff. So I like to work on a ratio of 6-to-1 when it's selling price to the cost of goods, right? Because you're at the stage where you're doing product research, and you could probably just tee up some suppliers. You don't even necessarily need to work with these suppliers, but jump onto Alibaba or 1688, talk to them, and just get some indicative pricing, which you could probably negotiate down like another 10% or whatever it is, or use a sourcing agent to do that. But if we're talking about a product that you're going to sell at $36, then you just want to pay your supplier, and this is for the entire package, right? So this would be the base product, the packaging, everything that you want to include, insert cards, any sort of accessories. Then if it's $36, you want to be able to source this thing for $6, right? Because when you do that, and that's like 1/6, so let's say that's 17%. Then you add logistics, and add the 30% Amazon fees, the 20% marketing, all that kind of stuff, and you do all the numbers, you're going to end up with close to 30% profit margin coming out of the other side, right? And that's where I think when you do your product research, you need to sort of understand these sort of ratios and numbers, to work with. Some people work on like a 4-to-1 on the landed costs. So that's another, sort of
Keystone pricing is that's a common one, right?
Yeah, sort of common one. I like 6-to-1 on the selling price to the cost of goods, because that's the point you're sort of at, where you're not even thinking about logistics yet. You're really just thinking about sourcing the product from product research, then sourcing the product.
That's something you can know immediately too. Unlike Keystone pricing, the 4-to-1 on cost of goods from the manufacturer with the estimated shipping costs in there. You have to figure out 3 different things.
That's right.
Figure that out. You only need 2 different things to figure out your model.
Yeah, that's right. And then, even with some of the, FBA fees and that, yeah, sure, the FBA calculator's there and that, but, you're still not getting exact numbers anyway, for any of the further costs down that process. So, that's what I like to use. But then the other thing that also, not so much bugs me, but it's not really talked about, is the cash flow aspects, right? Now, in a physical products business, I would say one of the top three challenges for a new seller in their first year of selling, so in the first 12 months of selling, will be cash flow, right? And this is where, especially if you get a product that's relatively successful or definitely successful, you are going to run into a cash flow hole where you're making really good profit. And if the margin's there and you're making really good profit, it's sort of a good problem to have, but you're still going to have to come up with the actual cash to service the inventory, right? Because your first order could be 1,000 units, but if it starts selling well, your second order is going to be 3,000 units, and your third order is going to be 5,000 units. Like, some of my students who have been selling for 6 to 8 months now, they're sort of getting to that $40,000 revenue per month range at like 25% net profit, and their orders are 6,000 units on a product that's like between, let's say, $5 to $7. So you have to come up with the actual cash flow, right? So there's a lot of spreadsheets that I use, and I'll definitely give these guys a plug. Dolman and Bateman, you can jump onto their website. So Dolman and Bateman, they're an accounting firm here in Australia. The partner, Arnie Shields, who and a lot of people like the sort of experienced sellers in Australia use Dolman and Bateman, but they release things like free cash flow models specific for Amazon private labeling and FBA, because one of the partners, he actually runs his own Amazon FBA business, and he does that so you can do case studies and all that kind of stuff for his clients. And yeah, they've got a really good cash flow spreadsheet where you plug some of the numbers in, and it basically tells you in month 3, if you're selling that amount and stuff like that, you may need to put in an extra $4,000, and in month 4 you may need to put in another $5,000. Your profitability is awesome, but only until when you look at this cash flow model, you'll get to like months 7, month 8, month 9. That's when you got money at bank, right? And so that's why I say for the first 12 months of this kind of business, cash flow is definitely going to be one of the top 3 issues that a new seller faces. And it's one of the things that is unspoken. And if you start to release multiple products, you have to service all those products too. So it's not just about the profitability, but also the physical cash, the cash flow that you need to come up with. And that's another really unspoken aspect of when you do this product research. So in those 4 stages that I talked about, that 4th stage is all about assessing all the profitability and the cash flow, so what you're getting yourself into, right?
Oh, I love that you're bringing that up too, because I talk with a lot of brand new Amazon sellers all the time, or people who are considering getting into it. And this is one of the most common mistakes that these people are coming to me asking about. They don't realize that if they have enough money for the first round of inventory, that's not enough. They also need enough money for the second round of inventory before they get paid for the first round of inventory. And that also doesn't end there. Is that I tell them stories of some of my friends who I know who have been very successful in this. They have multi-million-dollar businesses, but then they also had to go get lines of credit worth hundreds of thousands of dollars in order to fund the growth of that company, because the problems don't stop at the first round of inventory. They just multiply in proportion to the amount that you're selling, right? And the speed that you're growing.
Yeah, and it's pretty crazy. So, like, as an example, like, I sell in the multiple marketplaces, so US and in the EU and stuff like that. So, if I were to look at my sort of Amazon, revenue breakdown, it'd probably do like 2 million across all marketplaces. But US is like 65%. UK and Germany together are like 30%. The rest of the EU is a couple of percent. I wholesale into Japan, a couple of percent, and then Australia is like 0.5%. So when I sort of did the whole migration to the UK and Germany and to launch over there, I remember taking out a loan for I think about 170K from Amazon. So Amazon provide you with all those loans and stuff like that, and I generally don't take them and stuff like that. But for expansion, yeah, it was like to get so much, like I probably had around 22 products or something like that to get over to those marketplaces, and obviously the inventory, the launch costs, all that kind of stuff that you need to put in place, even listing translations. So a whole bunch of work that you need to do to get your your listings ready there, even getting all the initial burst of reviews, that all costs time, effort, and money. So to do all that, taking out a loan, especially for the inventory and to service the cash flow, that's something I did. So it's, you're absolutely right. It's not, everyone sort of thinks after even, a year or 18 months or whatever it is that you're just going to be, cranking out like profit and stuff like that. You are, but also when you start to expand And let's say you want to release 2 or 3 products. Like right now I'm working on, 3 products to release over the next couple of months. And even that, like it does drain your cash flow depending on the types of products. And I'm sort of moving towards more high price products as well. And this is something that's going to feed into this profitability discussion, because the higher the pricing of your product, the better your ratios are going to be, right? Because like when you look at and the sort of price range that I've been teaching these days is between $18 and $70, right? Back in the day, like even like a couple of years ago, you could be quite successful with products that are like $13 or $15, right? But right now, the Amazon fees are definitely getting higher each year. Things like cost per click on your PPC campaigns and all that, that's getting a bit higher, all that kind of stuff. So it just starts to eat into the profit of lower priced products, right? And especially if your product is bigger, but if your product's really small, you could probably go for a slightly lower price. But that $18 to $70 range is what I've sort of been teaching my students and stuff like that. And then within that, there's a really good sweet spot between sort of like $25 to $40, right? Because at like a $70 product, and I've got a couple of products that are like $99, $100. Like people do a little bit more research, right? So if you're going to buy a product that's like $100, then you're probably going to, at minimum, read some more reviews, compare a few listings. You might even watch some YouTube videos or, read a couple of blogs on reviews and all that kind of stuff. So you're doing more research. And so you might need the customer to come back to your listing 1 or 2 times before they buy, right? So yeah, there's that aspect to it, right? But then in that sweet spot of, $25 to $40, it's still within that impulse buy range, right? Where people are just going to, hey, see a product, blah, blah, and they're just happy to buy, or just look at another product, or, they might click on a sponsored ad within a product listing page, go to your product and buy, right? So that sort of $25 to $40 range, I think is really good. As soon as you start moving up, then the ratios that we've been talking about can be manipulated a little bit or changed. So once you get to like that $60, $70 range, you don't need a 6-to-1 anymore on your selling price and your cost of goods. You can go with like a 5-to-1, right? Because at, let's say, a $70 product, and the logistics costs, if it's like a same size product, like all else being equal, let's say, everyone talks about 2 pounds, within a small shoebox type product. So if it's the same sort of weight or dimensional weight, then your logistics cost on a $70 product in real dollar terms and a $30 product could be the same, right? You could just be spending $3 in the sea shipping, container loads, whatever it is, and then, or you could be doing air shipping, and it's still going to be $5.5 per kilo, all right? So therefore, if it's the same weight, proportionally as a percentage, of $70 and proportionally on $30, the logistics as a percentage is just going to be less for the $70 product, right? So therefore, you don't need a 6-to-1 ratio. You can move it down to a 5-to-1 ratio just on the logistics. But very similarly, when it comes to the percentage fees from Amazon, the referral fee is a percentage, but the FBA fees is also just real dollar numbers, right? So they'll say, $5.90 for the shipping, and that includes pick and pack and warehousing and all that kind of stuff. So the higher the price of the product you actually go, and if you can keep it at the same ratio, then you've just got a way bigger profit margin, net profit margin coming out of the other end. And even if you're spending $1 on a cost, like $2 on the cost per click, and you're also spending $2 on a cost per click for your $30 product, again, it's just as a percentage, you're just going to get way higher profitability. So over the past, let's say, year and a half, I've definitely been shifting to higher priced products. That's one of the main reasons. And the other main reason is just the barrier of entry is a little bit higher, right? So you do have to spend, more to get into that market because the cost of the product's high. So the cost of the goods is higher. Your listing needs to be way better. Because I'm brand registered and all that kind of stuff with my brands, then, I'll always just get everything done properly, video, EBC, all the kind of stuff, you've been helping me out with, get all that stuff done so that, so the listing is sort of ready to go. So on the high price listings, like 100%, there's just way more profitability in it. So that's another thing that I sort of see as a little bit of a trend for more experienced sellers. But for new sellers, it is still slightly harder to get into that kind of market because you do have to, fund, more capital, right? You do need to inject more capital to fund those sort of products.
Yeah, it is a real barrier to entry, right? And I just want to touch on that for a second here. Barrier to entry, I think, is so, so important. Um, it reminds me, I got a message actually yesterday from one of my friends who has another friend who his brand is being destroyed by Chinese copycats, so to speak. But his attitude towards it, I think, is completely backwards. He created an infographic that basically said, hey, this is the Chinese brand that's ripping off my product. They make it exactly the same.
No,
And I'm
yeah.
going to pay $10 to anyone who goes and leaves a 1-star review on their product because they're ripping off my product and they're Chinese copycats. Which to
No.
me that's an even worse thing to do than the Chinese company. Like the Chinese company was maybe stealing some of their pictures. But for him to do that, in my opinion, is much worse. And I think he has it backwards because that's just how the market pretty much works. He didn't have a big barrier to entry for someone else to go in and create the exact same product that he has. And so someone did. There's nothing technically wrong with what these Chinese companies did.
Yeah.
And instead of putting his energy into trying to create products that have barrier to entry and innovating and coming up with new novel things, he's just putting his energy into trying to do some black hat stuff to protect his product he came up with, you know?
Yeah, it's sort of a really crazy situation, and I know that, and this is probably the US marketplace you're talking about, because you know that there has been a big influx of Chinese sellers and especially factories, and they can compete obviously on price, and you know the cost of everything there is lower, and you know all that kind of stuff, right? And there's a lot of Chinese factories that are just way happy to make losses for like 1 or 2 years to get their presence and their footprint in. I mean that's really the Chinese way, and there's a lot of US-based, course creators, experience sellers, and all that kind of stuff, consulting companies that now just go over to China to teach a lot of these factories how to, get onto Amazon and do all these sort of things, right? So they're getting better and better. And if you're not creating a, proper value proposition for your product, and you're just merely competing on something that's generic or price and all that kind of stuff, then it's really long-term suicide. Like, because eventually these things will happen. Like exactly what happened to this client or this friend of yours, right? So it's one of those things where I say when you're sort of creating a product, and we talked about differentiation, but it sort of goes a little bit deeper than that. So what I like to say about this is, and this is to do with the profitability side of things too, because you've looked at the numbers and you need to create your offering, right? And with your offering, like I like to look at it from 3 perspectives, and there's 3 factors into this. And the first one is you need to visually stand out. And I know that it's like a little bit superficial, right? But as someone sort of scrolling the search results and all that kind of stuff, if your product sort of pops, then you're just going to get a few more eyeballs onto it, and you're going to get more clicks through and traffic and stuff like that. And if your listing is well optimized, then you can convert that traffic, right? Those customers. So visually standing out, I think, is a sort of an important thing. But the next one is you need to at least have one primary differentiator. You can have 2, you can have many, but at least one, right? Where you would say off your marketing, whether it's in your title or your first bullet or some of your images, that's the feature you're going to push, and you're going to push that feature in terms of the benefits, right? So it's not just, hey, here's my feature, but this is, feature, and these are the, it's all benefits driven, right? So this is the solution it solves, and these are the benefits. But you need to have that primary differentiator. And then the third thing is you need to add more value in the offering, right? So, it's like since the dawn of time, like everyone that buys stuff, like they want more value, right? The best value product. So by adding in, potentially a couple of, little accessories, or you could take a strategy of bundling, some couple of products together, whatever the strategy is, you need to just have more value than, your competitors, right? And once you've got those 3 things, right, so you visually stand out, you've got a primary product differentiator, 1 or more, and you've sort of, got some additional value, whether it's ebook, some tiny little accessories, something complementary like a case or whatever it is for your product. Then you've actually got what I would consider a USP, right? So a unique selling proposition. And so when people come to your listing versus your competitor's listing, you're giving them more reason to buy your product. So I've never sort of gone with, generic products, and I've always tried to, bundle in some accessories, useful things. And, I always use things like colors and stuff like that are just a little bit more sort of punchy and stuff like that. And that's just to generate this entire USP. But when you do that, like, especially with things like the accessories and things like that, and what your primary differentiator is, it also still relates to your profitability. And the reason why we've got those stages in that product research where you say, hey, you do the numbers and the metrics, then you have to create your offering with this USP in mind, is because whatever you create there, that's going to be the cost that you're going to have to source at, right? So if you chuck a couple of tiny little accessories in, and if they're only 10 cents each and stuff like that, that's cool. But if you're going to bundle in an accessory or another product, and that's going to be like $2 or $3, then that's increasing your cost base considerably, right, for your cost of goods. So in that whole, creating your offering, you've got to be a little bit more smart about it these days, where you would say, does that additional thing that I put into this package, or whatever I'm actually including, or whatever I'm developing, does that actually give me more than a 6-to-1 ratio on the ROI, right? And that selling price of cost of goods. Because like you might actually have a base product, and maybe you can get it to like a 5-to-1 ratio, or 5.5-to-1 ratio on selling price to the cost of goods. But by putting in a couple of accessories, or whatever you do, you could probably bump up the selling price a little bit at a really low cost. So let's say the accessories only cost you, like that example, a couple of 10 cents, right? Then, for 20 cents, you might be able to sell $2 or $3 more, right, on your selling price. And therefore, now your ratio, instead of 5.5-to-1, can be 6-to-1. Right?
That is super valuable. And let's talk for a second about, is the accessory or whatever you're bundling in there actually valuable to the customer? Like, I've seen a lot of examples where someone throws in something that is pretty questionable. Like, I don't think the audience actually cares about that at all, and it costs a significant cost. But then let's use the example of a basketball. If someone has a basketball, they probably are going to need one of those little pins to attach to an air pump to keep the basketball pumped up. And if you sell with that little pin, which maybe costs 5 cents or 10 cents, whatever it is, that could be the reason why someone buys yours over someone else's, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with most of my products, I generally, have some accessories in there, and they're generally quite cheap. And I'll even give you some examples, right? I sell, jump ropes, and you've probably seen a couple, and like we have either like a carry case, or we have some extra cables and stuff like that. And like one of those nylon carry cases, they're like 20 cents, right? And like a cable, it's like 30 cents, right? But you can bump up the price, because people that use jump ropes, I mean, they're doing jump ropes, and even on, ground or concrete, and definitely outside on concrete and tarmac and stuff like that, those cables are going to get frayed like within a few months. So they want to have a second cable. If they go to the gym and they put their jump rope in there, well, they want a little carry bag, right? So the accessories and stuff like that, as you say, like the basketball and the pin, great example, right? Because it's totally complementary, and that accessory is well wanted and needed by the by the customer. So it's all about perceived value. They perceive that value to be higher than the actual cost of the product, right? So it's not real tangible value, because these things can cost 5 or 10 cents, right, or 20 cents, but it's actually perceived value. They might perceive that value to be $2, right? So it's all about increasing the perceived value so that you squeeze more out of the actual profitability. And so one of the things that when I go through this with my students, we spend like a couple of weeks trying to come up with this offer, and all these different types of things. And I get them to not just read all the customer reviews and other people's listings and stuff like that, but go to YouTube where people are reviewing these products and see what other things they're actually using. So if they're they're making pastries with a rolling pin or whatever it is, then maybe they want a couple of extra cookie cutters, or like they're 5 cents each, or like a silicon baking mat, which are like 20 cents each, right? And don't do rolling pins, because it's a horrible product, because they're long and big and heavy. So definitely don't anyone go away doing rolling pins. That's a horrible product. But that's just an example where you can do that kind of research, where you watch these videos and people are showing you that they're using these little things. So then you say, okay, can I actually source this and all that kind of stuff and bundle it in with as accessories for my product? One of the tips that I'll actually provide here, though, is you want to make sure that the kind of stuff that you're pulling together into the package is definitely going to increase your profitability, or at least maintain it, so it's not negatively impacting your profitability, right? So you're putting in something that's like 40 cents, but then you can only squeeze like $1 out of it, so then it's like making your profitability worse. Sure enough, if you've got like a ratio of like 10-to-1, which, by the way, there are products out there that the ratios are massive, like one product which I worked on with one of my clients has a 12-to-1 ratio, selling price to cost of goods. Right? So then you can throw in a couple of extra things just to really pump up the conversion rates, right? Because you've got so much profitability to play with, right, that you can actually do that. But that's the one. But the second thing is, you want to be able to source those things from the same supplier, right? So you got your base product, the basketball and that pin. You want to be able to source it from the same supplier, because you can source from another supplier and have like supplier 2 send it to supplier 1, but it sort of complicates your supply chain, right? And in these sort of things, especially for new sellers, sometimes you're going to run out of inventory. We talked about the whole cash flow issue. You're probably pushing your cash flow and your reorders to the limit. So you don't want stuff like, supplier 2 can't get it to supplier 1 on time, or some craps happen, and then supplier 1 can't get the package together. Then you're sort of stuck on inventory and all that kind of stuff. So it's just more complication in your supply chain if it doesn't come from one supplier. But typically with this kind of stuff, like one of the things that I like doing is, especially if you have a good relationship with the supplier, you just tell them, you don't have to name their clients and stuff like that, but what are their other clients buying or doing or bundling? What are they putting together? What other accessories do you actually have that typically people pull together with this? What type of packaging options, because that increases value, perceived value as well. What sort of packaging options do you have? Can you show me all the photos of these things? So you can start to get, all that kind of information as well, and then do your research and sort of pull it all together. And that way your offering is a really, really solid offering that you can sort of get to the market. Numbers look good, but your offering is great. It's got really good profitability. And then you can sort of go, okay, tick, 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 4 ticks, and we can get this, we can settle on this product idea. All too often I basically see people saying, hey, I look at these 5 metrics and I don't do any of the other stuff. And they're like, oh, let's, bring this thing to market. And then they realize, down the chain, they're not making any money, or this thing won't sell. They launch and it doesn't, they pay $1,000 for the launch, and then it doesn't stick on page 1 because they can't convert because their offering sucks or their listing sucks. All that kind of stuff. So that's the kind of thing you want to avoid in that whole process. And I think profitability and the whole cash flow thing is a big piece. Right?
And I love what you said about the sourcing it from one single supplier and trying to take the complexity out of your supply chain, right? Because think about the scenario if you have a product that's just crushing it and you need to restock as soon as possible, and then the basketball pin manufacturer is just late, or they're not responding to your messages, or maybe they're just gone. You can't sell that product anymore. You can't send the product without the basketball pin because you're going to get a bunch of 1-star reviews and your product is garbage, right? And it would suck to lose out on a highly profitable product just because the tiny little accessory manufacturer messed something up or something like that, right? And another framework too, since I'm a big copywriting nerd, big sales nerd, right? So a good framework for trying to identify a good accessory or something to bundle with your product is to identify the barriers to people buying, their objections. Like, why wouldn't they buy something? If you can identify what their objection is and then provide something, an accessory that gets rid of that objection, that is gold right there. So I'm just going to put that out there. It's not easy
that's cool.
But you can figure it out. That's
a top tip. I want to steal that one. that's really good. Yeah, because that's absolutely right. If they've got particular objections or they're reserved about something, or they have doubts about something, and if you can have an accessory that cracks through that or sort of alleviates that, that's gold. That's really good.
So Stephen, when it comes to profitability and just making sure they have this right, what do you think is like the number 1 and number 2 things that people really need to focus on to make sure that everything's going to work out?
Yep. So I think it actually all starts with the product research and the sourcing, right? And, so we've talked a little bit about that already. So you need to get it right from the outset. And the other thing that I would actually say is, if you're really struggling with this kind of stuff, and especially if your first inventory order is going to be in the vicinity of, let's say, $4,000 and up, right? You want to use a sourcing agent, right? So with, even how experienced I am, and I've dealt with so many suppliers over the years and all that kind of stuff. And by the way, like my sort of background, as you probably know, in the corporate world was consulting. I sort of did that for 20 years and stuff like that. So negotiation like sort of comes a bit more natural to me, just because of the experiences I've had in my sort of personal life. But even then, a sourcing agent can still generally get 10% better cost. Right, because they're on the ground and they know a lot of these suppliers already. They do it face to face, and because they're a sourcing agent and stuff like that, it generally so I'll give you an example. In my second year of selling, I had, I think, 7 products or something like that at that stage. I went to a sourcing agent and I basically said, as a cost cutting exercise, I need better pricing, and here's all my products. I actually physically sent them all my products and I say, this is exactly the thing that I want. Like I don't want something that's less, that weighs less or that's small or whatever. I want these exact things. So they went and sourced it, and you pay $400 or $500 for every product or project, and they go away and source it, and invariably they came back with better cost. Right. So then I'm like, okay, I'm out of that exercise, I'm just better, 11 or 12% better than I was before. Right. So, and the reason why I say that $4,000 for your initial order is because you are going to probably spend $400 or $500 if it's like a good product sourcing agent, and they would.
So this is a one-time fee, not a recurring fee.
Yeah,
There's different ways to pay them, right? You prefer
the
one-time.
I go one time, get all the details. They go to like 20 factories, and I always just specify factories instead of trading companies. And then they go to the factories. They come back with 3 fully negotiated quotes. So I want to see the PIs that come back. Now, here's the actual PI with all my stuff in it, and I create a spec. And my specs are generally 4 or 5 pages. Got all the photos in there, all that kind of stuff. Exactly materials, everything, the packaging, the insert cards. I'll even say stuff like for the insert card, it needs to be, like 6 by 4 inches, 250 GSM paper, double-sided full color print, matte finish, blah, blah, blah. It's very specific, right? So they have to go away and, source that. And then, if it's $4,000 and you're sort of paying, $400 or $500, then it's about 10%. And they're probably going to get you that 10%, right? Which is what my experience has been. They're generally 10 or 15% better than what you can actually get. But the biggest thing is it's also, speed to market, right? So for you to go out to talk to 20 factories, try and figure out whether they're factories or trading companies, go through all the questions, try and get all that kind of stuff, that might take you like 3-4 weeks as well. Whereas for a sourcing agent, they'll take them like 7 to 10 days. You've got it done, get the, non-custom samples and sort of go, take the sampling process. So I would actually say it all starts from your product sourcing, where you need to get the profitability right for each product, right? But then as you go along, like my other thing is for your first year, focus more on growth, right? And the profitability, as I said, for my second brand, the profitability is a little bit lower, and I'm totally good with that because I know that profitability is probably going to be closer to 30% once I get into years 2, 3. Because when you get into year 2, like there's so much cost-cutting exercises that you can actually do. And I'm not talking about, like reducing the quality of the product and all of that. But then, you can do so much to reduce the overall costs and also with the cash flow as well, right? So focus on growth. Once your product starts to convert better and all that kind of stuff, you're probably going to get, better numbers with PPC and advertising and all that kind of stuff anyway. So expenses will probably reduce a little bit. But, first year, focus on growth. Second year, go through a whole heap of, cost cutting and cost reduction to then get the profitability a little bit better. But yeah, like first year for new sellers especially, and if you're struggling with the sourcing, I would say, in that range of like, if you're going to spend $4,000 in your first order, you're going to make that back anyway. But the biggest thing is, once that cost is negotiated, it's every single order after that. Right, so you're going to, break even with the product, the sourcing agent fee on your first order, but every order after that, you're benefiting, right? Because you're getting a better price. And then the other thing is, once you move up the volume tiers and you're going like 3,000 units or 5,000 units, you might get like 4 or 5%, volume tier discount from the supplier. But that 4 or 5% is always on the original negotiated cost. So if that cost is high, it's still going to be high. And if that cost is lower, you're getting 4 or 5% on a lower cost, right? So make sure that you source the product at a really, really good price. And I can't sort of stress that more. Like a lot of things that I do with my students, we really, put the effort into, and even if it takes like 2 or 3 weeks, product research might take 2 or 3 weeks, but, like even sourcing might take, 2 or 3 weeks to source it really well. We use sourcing agents and stuff like that to do it. It's just, getting that right makes everything else easier, because if you've got more profitability there, well, guess what? In the initial few months, you can be more aggressive with your marketing. You can drive more traffic. You can, do more with your listing. Pay a better copywriter. Like, go to Daddy and get, really good graphics done and all that sort of stuff. You can do all that kind of stuff as opposed to trying to just, do it on the shoestring because you've got more margin to play with, right?
Yeah, I think it's Russell Brunson who always says, he who can spend the most money to acquire a customer wins. Yeah. And I've seen that to be true in so many people's businesses. If you can spend all the money on the marketing and the branding and all this kind of stuff, you get that customer, then even if you lost money on getting that customer, you have that customer for a long period of time that can continue to buy from you, then in the long term you win, right? Instead of being a brand that they don't have the branding behind them, maybe the product's not as good, they don't really have any marketing, then you're up to the whims of the Amazon algorithm and people's impulses when they get to page one, and maybe they see maybe they like your product, maybe they don't, right?
Yeah. And this is why I always say, like, I come to you for my, some of the graphics and all that kind of stuff, because you really want to spend money and get really good stuff done, right? Like there's no point, like in my opinion, right, going to Fiverr and spending, just $50 on your images. I mean, that's ludicrous, right? Like you're trying to market, and you're trying to sell hundreds of units a month, and you're trying to generate tens of thousands of dollars in revenue, but you want to spend just like a little amount on your graphics, and that's precisely it, right? Like you want to got to do the marketing properly, and it starts with the listing, and then the advertising and all that kind of stuff. But if your listing doesn't convert and it's not well optimized, and I'm not talking about just for the Amazon A9 algorithm, but for customer conversions, like the imagery, the copy, and all that kind of stuff, it doesn't matter how much traffic you pour into it, it's still going to be an underperforming product, or you're not squeezing enough out of the lemon.
Absolutely. And before I ask my last question, Stephen, where can people find you online?
So privatelabelauthority.com. And the last time I did one of these podcasts, I did get quite a few inquiries. I just want to sort of be upfront with that in terms of my one-on-one coaching and stuff like that. I am relatively full in terms of the one-on-one coaching that I can sort of provide. I generally don't take on more than 15 students, and I'm getting pretty close to that limit already, because a lot of people do want to do more one-on-one coaching, and it's sort of just takes the sort of guesswork out of it, and also they want to take the business to the next stage and stuff like that. But yeah, privatelabelauthority.com. But it's in terms of business inquiries, hopefully I can service some, but it's not something I want to continue to plug a lot.
Yeah, I was thinking about one-on-one coaching is that it has to be one-on-one, right? More valuable, but you can't scale it. You can't scale one-on-one coaching to hundreds of people.
Yeah, and I think it's a really good thing for me, because I really see really awesome results with one-on-one, as opposed to courses and even sort of group coaching. Like the one-on-one aspect just removes all the inconsistencies out of it, and the interpretation out of a lot of things, and you can really just sort of help guide people. But yeah, we can talk about that another time. It's I think it's a really good method to sort of give back to the community, but also really see good results with the students.
And my last question for you, Stephen, do you think that Amazon FBA is still a good opportunity to get into in 2019?
Yeah, I like, my short answer is absolutely. But here's the thing. I actually think it's easier to launch products now than it was 2 or 3 years ago. Incidentally, I actually do believe that. And the reason is now there's so much more in the process. And if you do everything right in each one of those processes, so let's say if it's product research, your product offering, then you do the sourcing properly, the sampling, the listing, the listing optimization, the launch, the reviews and all that kind of stuff. If you can do everything well, it is actually now an easier platform to work with, right? And the good old days where you just throw stuff up, people just doing whatever. Those days back then didn't have any real data for you to make decisions on. Right now, there's so many tools, so much data, there's like almost a little cottage industry of support for Amazon sellers, right? But now it does favor more experienced sellers, right? So I've got to put that out there. So for the new sellers that are coming in, it's just going to take you it's a longer period of time to hone your craft, right? But the thing about it is, to me, it's once you hone that craft, it is actually easier right now, believe it or not, to make money on Amazon, in my opinion, than it was 3 or 4 years ago. It was way less competitive then, but now there's quite an established way of doing things, and you just got to do everything well, and you'll be successful. So I still think the money's in there, but for new sellers, there's just a huge learning curve. And I always say, it's like drinking out of a fire hose. Those fire trucks with those big massive hoses. That's what's going to feel like over the first 6 to 12 months. You're just like guzzling water, trying to just drink all this information down.
Or guzzling coffee, whichever is better.
Yeah.
Awesome, Stephen. It's been so good having you on here. And guys, definitely be following Stephen Loy. He is one of the most knowledgeable people that I have the pleasure of talking with about Amazon, as you guys have just got a really good taste into. And he has such a refreshing look on the Amazon ecosystem and gives such a down-to-earth, true look at the reality of the situation. He's not trying to make everything look like some get-rich-quick scheme, pyramid scheme kind of thing like a lot of people out there unfortunately do. He just gives you the straight, raw truth of his experience building a multi-million-dollar Amazon business. So thank you so much for coming on here, Steven. It's been awesome, man.
Yeah, awesome. We'll do it again.
Heck yeah. And guys, if you want to check out the show notes and any links mentioned here, just go to kenjiroi.com/blog and look for the episode about Stephen Loy. Or there's another actually similar episode about Keith Mander going into leveraging debt to grow your Amazon business with. Really dovetails nicely into this one. So until next time, guys, take care.
Talk soon.